You're listening to The Art of Work, an optimal living interview with Jeff Goins and Brian Johnson.
Hi, this is Brian. Welcome back to the Optimal Living interview series. Today I'm thrilled to be chatting with Jeff Goins, who is a writer, a very popular writer who's written a number of books. The one we're going to talk about today is The Art of Work, a proven path to discovering what you are meant to do. I really enjoyed it, and we get so much feedback on all the work we do around purpose and discovering our calling. And if that's something that you are pursuing right now, or know someone who's pursuing that, which is basically everyone, I think you'll enjoy the book. And I'm really excited to chat about a few of my favorite big ideas. Jeff, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me.
All right, man, let's start at the top. The Art of Work, subtitle, A Proven Path to Discovering What You're Meant to Do. Tell me how you came up with, let's name this The Art of Work.
Well, like a lot of the good titles, like a lot of the best titles for my books, I did not come up with it. So I can't remember what we wanted to call this. I think I wanted to call it like Art and Work or something. And my agent at the time said, you need to call this The Art of Work. And I was like, oh, that's good. So, yeah, I mean, I think the idea behind that, though, is so many books and so many people, well-meaning people, but people nonetheless that I can't really relate to, and I know a lot of people that can't relate to this kind of message, say that, in order to find your purpose, in order for you to discover your dream job, in order for you to do what you're meant to do, it is a process. It is a step-by-step systematic formula that you follow. And I mean, let's just be honest, life doesn't follow formulas. And so I found my dream job. I kind of created this path that felt like I was very much moving towards my life's calling. And when I got there and people said, how did you do it? My first reaction, my response was to give them this formulaic response that a lot of people give, which is I figured out what I wanted to do. I discovered what I wanted to do. I got a vision for my future. And then I worked really hard and I had some failure, overcame those obstacles, and then I succeeded, and now I'm the guru telling other people how to do it. This is kind of the way like self-help stuff works. And that's what I was doing because I thought like this is what you have to do. You have to sort of sanitize your story, lie a little bit and say like, I've got my crap together. I'm sorry that you don't. And when I started interviewing people for this book, they started telling me their stories, and I realized it was a lot messier than that. And as they were telling me their stories, people who had also found their callings, I realized these things were true about my story as well. I was just changing it a little bit because I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a guru is like make it sound easier and more systematic and more formulaic than it really is. And so the art of work is this idea that it's not a science, it's an art. Work, and I use that as sort of your life's work, the thing that you're supposed to do with your skills and gifts and passion. Like it's an art, and there's lots of different ways to get to, your destination, your dream job. And it's going to be messy. It's going to feel more like a path, with twists and turns, and you can't necessarily see all the way down the road. But as you get a little bit further down, you look back and you go, oh, like that makes total sense. And so that's the idea behind the title.
Right on. And I love the way you stress that, and you say finding your purpose is more of a path than a plan. It involves those twists and turns you never expected. Ultimately, these surprises lead you to your destiny. And then you make the great point that once you get there, you've really just begun. Get ready for the next leg, right?
Yeah. And it really is a lifelong journey. So when I say destination, it really the journey is the destination. It is a lifelong process. The Art of Work describes these sort of 7 stages, and I'm very clear. Like, look, these aren't steps, but like these stages kind of overlap in life, and they're constant themes that continue for the rest of your life. The first one is awareness. It's this idea that like before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, as Parker Palmer says, I need to listen to my life telling me who I am. So listening to your life is this practice that you do initially to go, well, what am I really supposed to do? Who am I really? But then, you do that throughout the rest of your life. It's a discipline of asking yourself over and over and over again, what resonates with me? What am I made to do? And we try different things that we think are going to make us successful or famous or whatever. And sometimes we fail and we go, wait a second. Like this thing that I thought I wanted isn't what I really wanted. So you're constantly course correcting, as you go. I like to say that you're not done until you're dead. And so the destination is your deathbed. The destination is a fulfilled life. So that when you're lying on your deathbed, you go, look, it wasn't a perfect life. I made mistakes, but I do not regret becoming the person that I was meant to become. I do not regret missing that. And I think a lot of people do miss it. And you don't have to. And this is a book that tries to shed some light on things that extraordinary and ordinary everyday people do to live lives of greater purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah, that's awesome. You do a great job of weaving in stories of just kind of the normal person, right? In each of those 7 characteristics of a calling. And I want to talk about calling a little bit more, which is a word that you use a lot throughout the book, and kind of what that means for you. And then just do a quick overview of those 7 steps and talk about some of my favorite insights related to them. But can you just tell us a little bit more about calling and what that means for you?
Yeah, so, some people sort of attach a religious connotation to this word. I think that's fine. I have, I'm a person of faith, but I wrote this book, in a more agnostic way, really because I just found it very, very interesting that my friends from church and my non-church friends, like my friends who didn't care anything about religion, a lot of them use this term calling, this idea that your life is about something and that something is bigger than you. So, you can use it with purpose or life's work or whatever. And I use a lot of those words as well. But I like the idea of calling because it suggests that there's something bigger than you that's calling you to it. It could be the work itself, the universe, God. And everybody I talk to practically says this about the work that they're doing or the work that they wish they could do. And we hear this so often, it's become cliche. I like my job or it's okay or whatever, but it's not what I was meant to do. And it seems that we are almost entitled these days to finding fulfilling work. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing at all. I just think it's where we're at culturally right now, which is why I wrote this book. I wanted to give some language to some feelings that a lot of people were already having, which was this sense of angst. Like, I don't want my job to just be a means to making a living. I want it to be a means to making a meaningful life. So a calling is really, I describe it as the reason you were born. Like, this is why you're here, and you're going to spend the rest of your life figuring that out. And I don't think that a job completely equates to a calling, but at the same time, if you're spending 8 hours a day, a third of your life working, spend some time thinking about how can you be intentional about integrating that work with your calling and vice versa.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the aspects of the first characteristics of awareness that I loved was you say you must believe that you were called to something, right? Because if you don't have that belief that there's something bigger than us that's calling us to figure out what we're here to do, well, then good luck ever really getting on the path, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that something, that sense that I was meant for more, I call that awareness. And it's a little nagging feeling that keeps you up late at night or gets you up early in the morning. And every once in a while I run into somebody who doesn't have that feeling. They're fine with everything. And I don't wish those people ill. I don't judge that at all, but I can't relate to it, because so many people I know, are sort of, their lives are saying either explicitly or implicitly that thing that Jack Nicholson said in that great movie, is this as good as it gets? Like, is this all there is, or is there more to life? And the idea behind the art of work is that, yes, there's more to life. This is not all there is. You were meant to do interesting, meaningful work, and you have a responsibility. If you feel that that tug, that nag, you can't ignore it. You've got to figure it out. It won't necessarily be easy, but the pain that you feel of trying it and failing is less than the pain of regret of never attempting it at all.
Right on. So that's a pretty good look at the first characteristic, awareness. Then we have the second is apprenticeship, and the third is practice. I want to talk about painful practice. Talk about the importance of getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, so painful practice is this idea that one of the myths that I tackle in the book is that just because it's easy doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it, and vice versa. Just because it's hard doesn't necessarily mean that it's not your calling. And I see so many people give up worthy pursuits because it gets hard at some point. Here's what I learned through this little research project that I did. I interviewed hundreds of people who had found their calling, and I found a lot of similar themes amongst all these different case studies. And they resonated with me, with my own experience, and they resonated with a lot of biographies of famous people that inarguably discovered what they were meant to do. People like Mother Teresa and Walt Disney, not perfect people, but people who left an impact in the world nonetheless. And, one of those themes was that at a certain point it got hard. In fact, it always got hard. And it's kind of aligns with this idea that we've heard before about the 10,000 hour rule, which is based on a study by a guy named K. Anders Ericsson. But one of the interesting things about that study that people don't realize is it's not just about 10,000 hours doing anything. It's 10,000 hours of what he calls deliberate practice. And one of the qualities of deliberate practice is you basically have to, in athletics or in music, which were, some of the people that they studied, you had to push yourself to the limits of your ability, right? I mean, if you think about working out, right? Not that I'm necessarily all that acquainted with working out, but I aspire to one day be acquainted with working out. No, like you think about going into the gym or whatever, or training for a half marathon. You want to get better, right? So if you're gonna get stronger, you don't just lift the same amount of weights every time. Like just do the 10-pound dumbbell or whatever. I really can't do much more than that. Like you don't just do that because you're not going to get much stronger. Repetitions help, but at a certain point, you've got to do more reps and probably increase the weight. And so that's that idea of deliberate practice. So what that means is when I'm in the gym and I want to get a little bit stronger, guess what's going to happen? It's going to hurt a little bit. Like this isn't, I wish it didn't hurt, but at the same time, that pain, any bodybuilder knows this, like that pain means that something good is happening. I think the same thing is true in work and pursuing what you're meant to do. At a certain point, it gets hard. And that doesn't mean that you should quit. In many ways, it means that you should keep going. But here's the thing. If you keep going and you don't like it anymore and it just kind of sucks, then you probably should quit it. Because the people that I know who love the work that they do, when it's tough, when it's hard, when it's painful, they still love it. And so painful practice is this idea, like push yourself to the limits of what this craft demands of you and see if you still like it. And if you do, it just might be your calling.
That's awesome. I love the way you describe it. And we talk a lot about Anders Ericsson's work and his new book, Peak.
Really excited.
And all this stuff. And just so cool, this that importance. And I love the way you just described it, and you describe it in the book of being willing to get out of your comfort zone. And the beauty of homeostasis, right? We're going to recover and get stronger so we can handle that new challenge. But it's not just about putting in the reps, but being willing to invite that pain, which actually brings us perfectly to the next idea I wanted to hear your thoughts on. I described it as you juxtaposing leaps versus bridges. A lot of times, as you say, we have this naive notion of making a big leap, and you say it's more about building bridges. And you juxtapose that desire we have to want a clear map vis-a-vis what we really need is a shovel. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, well, this is this idea that you're uncovering your calling, that it's more about looking backward than it is about looking forward. And talked about listening to your life. And that's what I think, we're talking about here. If you're going to figure out what you're meant to do, it's probably not something completely new. At the same time, you're not constrained by the things that you've done. So like if your dad was a plumber and your grandpa was a plumber and you grew up plumbing, like you don't have to be a plumber, right? But the chances are that hidden in your past is some clue about your future. And so I say it like this, the past doesn't dictate your future, but it should inform it. So for example, when I was kind of feeling this angst, I was in this good job, I was kind of approaching the end of my 20s, and I just saw this pattern. I've been working at this job 5 years, and basically at the end of every year, I got a raise, I got a little bit more responsibility. I got a raise, I got a little bit more responsibility. It happened every year, and so that was really exciting. It was like being a hamster, and going up and getting the little water thing, getting the little drip. And I was like, oh, okay, I do this, I get a reward. I do this, I get a reward. And so I kept doing that. And I was like, well, what if I extrapolate this out for the next 10, 15 years, and I'm 40, and I'm still doing this, still getting raises, still doing well, still being responsible. Like, how will I feel? And I realized I would have felt like I coasted, because what I was doing was easy compared to what was in me. But I didn't know what was in me. So I felt this angst, and I literally drew a line on a piece of paper and started plotting out major moments in my life, memories that popped into my head. And one of those moments was when I won the 6th grade spelling bee, and the winning word was acquiescence. And I was like, that's weird. Like how many 6th graders know how to spell acquiescence?
Challenge me to think about how to spell it right now. Nice job.
And I mean, it was just like, it felt normal to me. And I realized, well, like that wasn't normal to everybody else. Because my mom used to read me the dictionary on car rides, because she loved English. That was her thing. She was a very meticulous speller, and she wanted me to be a good speller too. And it was fun. And so I was like, well, that's weird. Like, not everybody has that sort of experience. And then fast forward to being a teenager, and my dad taught me how to play guitar, and I joined a band. My favorite part of being in a band was writing songs. And then I became a Spanish major in college, and I loved language. I loved vocab and grammar and picking apart, the different verb conjugations and just learning about how do you communicate in a different language. And so you look at these things on the surface, and I used to draw when I was a little kid, and they're all different, right? Was he going to be an artist? Was he going to be a musician? Was he going to be a professional spelling bee champ? Like, what was he going to do? A translator? And that's how I looked at my life when I graduated college. That's how a lot of people look at their lives at, these moments when they enter adulthood. And sometimes for the rest of their lives, they go, none of this stuff makes any sense. Now, listening to your life is this idea that there's a theme woven throughout all of those things. And when you pay a little bit more attention, you realize, like, what were the things that I was doing when I felt most alive? I was creating, I was making things. And so maybe I'm supposed to be a creative. And, at the time I was a marketing director, and there was a creative component to that and a non-creative component. And so as I started listening and looking and paying attention and dabbling in things, I realized, I'm supposed to be a writer. Or at least that's what I'm supposed to do in this next season of life. And then I started writing. And as I did, I fell more and more in love with it. And it got more difficult, and I loved the challenge of it. And, I just kept growing through that. So had I never just stopped and paid attention, not to what I thought I wanted to do with my life, what I admired about other people's success, but instead grabbed that shovel and started digging up pieces of my life and going, what was I doing when I was feeling most alive? Again, the past doesn't dictate the future, but it should inform it. So buried in your own personal history, or at least clues of some of the things that maybe you should be doing more of.
I love it. So bust out your shovels, get to work. And then the next idea I want to hear you riff on is pivoting, which is kind of, if you do the shovel digging, right, and you're kind of looking at the past and seeing where you want to go these days, and you try different things, right? Some will work, some won't. I love the way you described that pivoting isn't plan B. It's part of the process, and the people didn't succeed in spite of failure. They succeeded because of it. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, well, one of the stories in the book, and all of these stories sort of, they're all representative of the whole process, but I tried to choose at least one story of somebody I talked to that especially illustrated a certain, step in the process. And so one story I told was the story of this Singaporean single mother named Jenny Pong. And Jenny becomes a mother. She gets pregnant out of wedlock, which that's a big taboo in Singapore, even bigger than in the United States. And in fact, if you're an unwed mother, you do not have the same social rights, in terms of the ability to access welfare or anything like that, that you would if you were like a widowed mother. And so, it's a big taboo. Her boyfriend broke up with her. Her parents kicked her out of the house. Everybody said, you need to have an abortion. Otherwise, we're going to disown you. She didn't want to have an abortion, so they disowned her. And all of this was kicked off by the fact that she didn't do that well on her exams. And she decides that she wants to have a natural childbirth, even though that isn't really done at the time. All the babies are on formula. Everybody has C-sections. And she decides, for whatever reason, that she wants to do it this way. And she told me, she knows, I've always been a rebel. And so she wanted to do this, but her mom didn't know how to, coach her through this process. She was living with her aunt at the time because she'd been kicked out of her parents' house. Just lots of pain and really failure. Like, her life wasn't looking that great at 23 years old. She's out of work. She's pregnant. And she's, sleeping, she's initially homeless, and then she's, sleeping in a family member's house. So she has the baby, ends up having to have a cesarean because it's just, too painful, and she doesn't know how to deal with that. And ends up just really struggling through life for a while, and has a very painful experience with childbirth, very confusing. And late at night, she spends looking up websites on the internet about sort of natural child rearing. She decides she wants to nurse and do these different things. She starts connecting with other mothers online who have similar interests as she does. This one person tells her who's a doula, says, you should be a doula. She's like, what's a doula? A doula is a birth coach. And she ends up taking some classes. She becomes a doula. And long story short, Ginny becomes kind of a national celebrity. She becomes a spokeswoman for single mothers in Singapore. She ends up on national television. She's been in some documentaries, done a lot of really interesting stuff. And now she leads the largest doula organization. And to be fair, she says, look, like, there's not a lot of doula organizations in Singapore, but she was like the first full-time Singaporean doula. And she ends up building this business around this, and she trains birth coaches. And what's really fun about her story is her pain of having a painful childbirth, being disowned by her parents, being sort of a social outcast, being a pariah. Like, all of that gets redeemed, and all of a sudden she gets to be that coach. She gets to be that person who helps all of these mothers walk through their birth plans. She gets to be that person that she never had. So, what does this have to do with failure and pivot points and those things? Well, failure, as they say, is, they say failure is not an option. That's silly. Of course, failure is an option. It's going to happen. Failure is an inevitability, right? Failure is an opportunity. And what I learned from studying all these lives of famous, successful people, and also just ordinary, everyday people living out their life's work is failure was a necessary ingredient in the path to their purpose. But here's the thing. When Ginny failed, for example, they didn't give up. They didn't quit. They didn't see it as a sign from God that they should just, close up shop and go do something else. Instead, they figured out a way to pivot around the obstacle, right? They went over it, under it, around it. And a great business example of this is how Groupon got started. Groupon, many people don't know this, started as a nonprofit entity called The Point. And the guy who started it, Andrew Mason, wanted to use social media to get people to vote on like charitable activities that they could do. So a year into it, they had lost $1 million. They're getting ready to lay people off and close up shop. And one of the investors said, what if we try to use all this technology that we've built, and instead of giving something away, we try to make money? And we're like, well, we'll give it a shot. And $13 billion later, that was a pretty profitable pivot. And it would not have happened were it not for that $1 million failure. Similarly, were it not for Ginny Pong's failure and just sort of, fumblings through early adulthood, she would not have become this national celebrity speaking hope into the lives of so many mothers in Singapore. So failure is totally an option. And more than that, it's inevitable. But the question is not whether or not you're going to fail, but what are you going to do with that failure? How are you going to use it to get you to your ultimate success?
Yeah, that's amazing. Super inspiring to see how we can alchemize those challenging times and those pains, not as like shouldn't have happened kind of things, but as Ryan Holiday says, the obstacle is the way, right? These are,
Love that.
inherent parts of our lives that when we allow them to be the fuel for our growth and contribution, they can be that in a really powerful way. So beautiful story, really inspiring. Really appreciate you sharing it. And that actually perfectly again dovetails to the next idea I wanted to hear your thoughts on. The first of Jeff's 7 characteristics of a calling was awareness, and then apprentice, practice, discovery, profession, mastery, legacy. I talk about those a little bit in the note. Obviously, get the book for more details on each. Tell us about the last, legacy. What does legacy mean for you, and how should we be thinking about it?
So when I was writing this book, I mean, it was really important to me to not sort of, be some sort of armchair philosopher or guru saying, hey, here's at 33 years old, I've got it figured out. Here's what a meaningful life looks like. And so this is why I studied so much the lives of, again, like I said, successful people, and then these ordinary everyday people that you may never heard of before, like Jenny Pong, Singapore's first full-time doula. And one of the things that surprised me, I guess, in this process was realizing that unbeknownst to me, sort of to my own shock, I thought the end of this process was going to be mastery. So when I wrote the book, it sort of had these 6 stages, but I realized like once you become a master, once you become great at something, which, kind of in the old days takes a minimum of about 10 years, and it's not 10 years of being, in the workforce, it's 10 years of doing that one thing. So for most people, you're going to hit mastery, at the earliest at 40 or 50, right? And then there's this whole hopefully second half of life that you get to figure out, what do I do with all this stuff? All this experience, all this knowledge and wisdom. And what I realized is in my own journey of wanting to reach personal greatness, I was missing some of it. I was missing the whole point. And the point is legacy. And what that means is it's not about you being great. Really, you're given all these gifts to be given away. You're called so that you can call others. And so what that looks like is I think that true success is not what you make or do in this life, but really what you leave behind. And that really is about the people that you invest in, the way in which you multiply your knowledge and your gifts and your wisdom by investing in the lives of other people. And we can all do that in our own ways each and every day right now with the experience that we have. But of course, this gives us a goal for greatness as we get better and better and better. The point is not so that people just remember us, but it's so that we can really multiply our influence and our impact by helping other people find their own way in their journeys.
I love it. 7 characteristics of a calling, a proven path to discovering what you were meant to do, the art of work. What did we not talk about that you think is important for us to highlight?
I maybe didn't talk a lot about the leap. You may have asked me about that, and I just didn't respond to it well. I tell this story about how I asked this girl out in college. Some friends of mine told me to go big or go home. I didn't know her that well, and so I was a little bit nervous about that, but I was like, okay. So I wrote her a song, and one random Saturday, I ran across campus and I knocked on her dorm room door, and she opened up, and I stepped into this room full of people, and she had about half a dozen friends there just hanging out on a Saturday. And I realized I'm in a tough spot, because if I don't do this right now, I'm never going to do it, because I'm never going to work up the courage again to just kind of kick down this girl's door and ask her out with a song. And yet on the other hand, if I do this and I risk failure, that's not going to feel good. So I stepped into her room and I started playing that song. And for about 90 seconds, I played this love song and I looked in her eyes and everybody looked at her and she looked at me. And I strummed that last C chord. And then there was just this silence. And then she said, I can't. I have to work. And then something worse happened. I decided to not leave. I don't know what was broken in my brain that day that made me think that it was less awkward to like play the song, get rejected, and just hang around than it would be to do all that and leave. But that's what I thought. And so I just hang out for like 10 minutes, enjoying the party. You know, people are like looking at me with strange looks. I'm like, what? Like, what's the big deal? Like that thing that I just did? No big deal. I do this all the time. It's just another stop on the college dormitory rejection tour. And then finally I get up and, leave after 10 excruciating minutes. And she follows me out and says thanks and bye. And I left. And it would be a long, long time before I ever did something so bold for a girl ever again. In fact, it would be another 4 years, I think, before I ever played a song for a girl like that. And the next girl I serenaded was the woman who became my wife. And the way I approached that relationship was very different from the way I approached the previous one. I treated it not like taking a leap, going big or going home. I treated it like building a bridge. And one of the surprising things I found in talking to all these people who were living their dream, when I asked them how they got there, it took a long time. And it was a bunch of gradual effort over time. In fact, I met this couple who started a coffee company in Burundi, the second poorest country in the world. It's in Africa. And I asked them how they got there. Like, how did you get to this point? They moved their whole family to Burundi. And the mom said, well, we took a leap. I said, wow, that's amazing. How long did that take? She said, it took 10 years. And I thought, that's a really long leap. Like that's one of those slow motion Matrix jumps, right? And like that's not a leap. That's a bridge that you build over time. And so if you're thinking about like, I want to do something meaningful, I have a dream and I don't know how to get there, I'm tired of hearing people say you just need to take the leap. You need to go big or go home. I don't disagree that maybe that works sometime for some people, but for most of the people I talk to, most of the people that I know who are succeeding in life and work and are doing the kind of work that most of us would dream of doing, it took a while to get there. They didn't take a leap, they built a bridge.
Amen to all that. And I appreciate you sharing that story. That is awesome. Bridges, more than leaps, and bumped heads in the process that are all part of the process. Redefining pivots, painful practice, and then that awareness that we're all called for something great. Jeff, I really appreciate you. Where can people connect with you and your work?
Thanks, Brian. I really, really enjoyed it. These are great questions. You can go to my blog, goinswriter.com, and if you sign up for the email list, you're going to get the first 2 chapters of The Art of Work for free. Again, that's Goins, like coins, but with a G, writer.com.
Right on, Goins. I learned before our chat. Coins with a G, writer.com. Check it out, and everything else that Jeff is up to, which is a lot of stuff. Once again, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Brian. A lot of people don't know all the stuff I do beyond these free videos I share on YouTube, so I thought I'd do a quick video to give you an overview of our membership program that you can get access to and get a ton of other stuff. So here's a quick look. $10 a month. Join the Optimal Living membership program. You get instant access to 250 philosopher's notes on some of the best optimal living books out there. Old school classics, positive psychology, modern stuff, mindfulness, peak performance, purpose, neuroscience, wealth, etc. And what you may not know is that in addition to the PNTV episodes, I create PDFs on all of these great books. So 6-page PDFs. Let's take a look at one of them. Joseph Campbell. You want to figure out how to live your hero's journey? Well, this is a great place to start. I basically pull out my favorite big ideas, riff on them, connect them to other books and other ideas, and help you apply this wisdom to your life today. That's what the PDF looks like. Again, we have 250 of these on all these different great books. And then I record those PDFs as an MP3. So you can listen to that MP3 while you're on a walk or working out or doing some errands or whatever. That is Philosopher's Notes. A lot going on there. And then in addition to Philosopher's Notes, you get access to Optimal Living classes, Optimal Living 101. Idea here is that all those great teachers come back to the same big ideas again and again and again. I distill those ideas into classes. Super practical, fun, inspiring classes ranging from Habits 101, Confidence 101, Getting Stuff Done 101, Meditation 101, instant access to all those classes. And then future classes include Relationships 101, Energy 101, Purpose 101, Business, Goals, etc. Those are our full-length classes. And then I create micro classes, 2 to 3 to 5 minute little bursts of wisdom on my favorite great ideas from these great books across the domains that you want to optimize in your life. So we have dozens of these so far. I create 50 new micro classes every month and 10 new Philosopher's Notes every month for $10 a month. So we're blessed to have thousands of members who are enjoying the program and sharing some incredibly kind words with us. And super simple, $10 a month, cancel anytime. Would be honored to be a bigger part of your life. And I appreciate your support. And here's to optimizing and actualizing.